These 1UZs are already pretty bulletproof on the first gens. They have the thicker rods and everything. What we're gonna do is we're gonna throw in some King race bearings in this thing just to freshen it up. Nothing looks damaged. If you look in one of our last videos, we kind of inspected everything. Everything looks great. So we're gonna throw in some standard bearings that are slightly oversized for oil clearance because this is eventually gonna get turbocharged. So we're gonna go ahead and rip off this oil pump. We have a 3UZ oil pump coming, which is a higher volume. There is slight modifications you have to do, but that isn't here yet. So we'll yank this off, toss it to the side for now, and we'll go ahead and get all the main and rod bearings. And then we also got some ARP main studs and rod bolts.
Built with soul, not just steel.
All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and yank off this oil pump off this front housing here. Again, we have a 3UZ pump on its way. It should be here on Thursday. Now, the only reason we're doing this is eventually gonna get turbocharged. So while this motor had good compression and could have just been thrown in, we wanted to freshen it up a little bit while we still had it out of the car, just to make it a little easier. I think there's one behind here. We'll have to get this out. So that's the ultimate goal here, is just to make this thing more stout in a way that when we do go to eventually put a turbocharger on it, or a supercharger, that matter, it'll already be kind of built internally. We're gonna leave the stock pistons. Again, the first generation 89 through 94 1UZ, this came out of 92 Lexus LS 400, have the thicker rods. I mean, they're quite a bit thicker than all the other models. So these things are pretty stout. The guys have ran these things up to 600, 700, 800 horsepower. So like I said, we're just gonna put a little bit of extra clearance for oil volume, and then just kind of freshen it up. We're not gonna touch the rings. As you saw in our last video, the factory cross hatches in the cylinder bores are still present. So the cylinder walls aren't even scarred or worn out or anything. This had about 200,000 miles. So we're just gonna leave all that for now, because we are gonna run this thing naturally aspirated for a while before we can afford to do a turbo. We wanna get into drifting, learn how to drift before we go adding so much power and then just crashing the car. So baby steps. So we'll get used to drifting at the power band. I think these are about 280 horsepower. The 77 Celica is a whopping 1,800 pounds wet. So plenty of power for that little car, rear wheel drive. So we'll get used to, you know, driving that and then go from there. So let's finish getting this off real quick. I believe this is gonna be 8. Yeah. Here we go. Let me grab a wrench real quick. All right, I got that broken loose. We'll set this off to the side with the rest of the components, because we will need the washer and the bolt for the new pump when it gets here. All right, let's see. Okay. You know, I'm hoping you guys can see that. Now that I think about it, let's lower you guys down just a hair. How about that? Okay. Hopefully you can see that. I need to get something to pop this cover off. That bolts out, that bolts out. Got one more here. Okay, two more actually. 1, 2. Okay, now that should be it on the oil pump housing. There it goes. Caught on this dowel over here. she goes. There we go. So one of the difference in the 1UZ to the 3UZ oil pump is the pressure relief valve on a 1UZ is held in with a snap ring. See if you guys can see this, there you go. Held in with a snap ring here, while the 3UZ has a bolt. So we do have to clearance for that bolt or change out the bolt. And also the depth of the actual pump gear in here is deeper, which means more volume. So okay, hopefully you guys can see me. Here we go. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and start getting all the main bolts out, main caps. We'll get those bearings out. We already inspected the rear one, which is the furthest from the oil pickup. So usually if there was any oil starvation, you're gonna see it at the furthest point on the block, and then work your way forward. The very far back bearing was in great condition, so likely we didn't have any oil starvation. Again, this engine had compression, it rotated freely, so we're not really super concerned. And the cranks are forged on here, so let's go ahead and we're gonna put you on time lapse and we'll get this cut open here. Okay, so now we can kind of get in here to inspect the rest of these bearings. Again, I'm pretty sure they're going to be just fine, but I want to double check. Where'd that other flat screwdriver go? Here we go. These things can be kind of a bear to get out at first. There's nice little slots here that are away from the surface, so you can use those slots to help break these free. This is going to be bearing number 1. It's pre-marked from the factory. Another thing about these motors, and I mentioned it in the previous video, is these are actually a 6-bolt main, so that's another reason why these engines are so strong. So you have 4 studs, and then 2 bolts coming in from the side on each one of these main caps. There she goes. Another little trick I like to use to help get these things up. Once you have enough room, you can run a rag right through and just kind of yank them up right here. This one should be, there it goes, off right there. All right. A clean rag so you guys can see. It's what, 290,000 miles, or 200, sorry, I think it's 218. So figure 200,000 plus miles looks like on one of these 1UZs. That thing is still in great condition. There's no scarring on the crank at all. So crank looks really good. Just kind of clean up things as we go. We're gonna go ahead and set number 1 down. Keep these things lined up even though they're already pre-marked, but let's see if we can do the rag trick from the very get-go. Usually they need a little bit of assistance to get them to initially pop, but I usually use a screwdriver, but we'll see if we can do the rags maybe simultaneously. There's two. Let's see here. There we go. All right. Again, bearing looks really good for 200 plus miles, 200 plus thousand miles. Looks really good. That's number 2. Crank looks excellent. No worries there. Let's get number 3 out of here. See if I can pop it with this so I don't go throwing it again. Okay, so trick to getting these, if you are swapping out the factory studs for some thicker ARP studs, just use the factory nuts. You're gonna put your wrench down first, so it'd be on the bottom side. You're gonna thread one nut upside down, one nut forward. Then once they cover the full thread, hold this one in place, tighten the top one down, and then you can use the bottom one as a jam nut to break these studs free really easily. So, and then you'll just do this, hold this again, put this on reverse. That's how you can back your nuts off to use them for the next one. So we're gonna pull all these studs out now. Having a short wrench for in here works really well because it goes right up over everything. So just a little short one. One thing to note, if you guys were to use a stud extractor, that would go even faster, but you would mess up the threads. But if, like me, I just don't have a stud extractor here. Otherwise, I just zip these guys out with a stud extractor and this go a little faster. But we're gonna finish the old school way of doing the double nut, the locking nut. So we're gonna get these all out and then we'll come back to you guys. All right, this whole side is off. Now we're gonna get the rest of this yanked off here, but we'll probably end up pulling the flywheel, pulling this rear cover because we're gonna reseal it anyways. We got a new rear main seal. We'll probably just end up pulling this whole crank out and maybe even doing a quick crank polish. I'll show you a little trick that I've used in the past that works really well. So let me get these out and we'll continue. Okay, so all those factory studs are out. Crank looks damn good. Looks really, really good. So what we're gonna do now, like I said, we'll probably pull this flywheel off, pull this cover off, and then we'll end up unbolting the rods, yank out the crank, and then we'll do a quick polish on the crank on all the journals. I'll show you what I use, and then we'll start going back together with the new oversized bearings. Sorry, they're not oversized, they're standard plus 0.001, which is that extra tiny clearance for a little bit of more oil volume. From what I've read online through all the forums and all the guys running 1UZs, whenever you turbocharge these things, you need to have a little bit more oil flow. So that's hence why we're doing the 3UZ higher volume, slightly a larger clearance, but still within spec on the standard bearings for the rods and the mains. So, and then this thing should be pretty much stout. We actually decided to go ahead and take out the rod bearings first, leave the flywheel on here so that way we can rotate this thing over to get to each rod a little easier before we yank this off, because it just makes a good turning point. Now, I don't see any factory rod numbers on these rods. So what we're gonna do is we have these punches, these stamps. We're gonna go ahead and stamp our rods on the same side, each rod. That way we know which ones are which. So we'll start with number 1. I'll show you guys how that is. You can buy these. I think they even sell these at Harbor Freight now. Used to be back in the day. I can't tell if that's a T or a 1, but it looks like a 1. So, or an upside down T. We'll just use it as a 1. So we're gonna put this right here on the side of the rod. And we're just gonna hit it. Just like that. So we're done with number 1. I'll show you guys how that looks. Right now when I pull it off here, so let me rotate this back a little bit. I think these are gonna be 12.12s. Oh, let's see here. 12.12s, yep. Okay. Again, we got APR rod bolts as well, so we'll set those down. Bearing looks excellent for 200,000 miles, but this is what I was talking about. If you can see there, there's a little stamp now. Got a number 1 on both sides, so we know these have dowels, so really you can't go backwards, but, and they may have numbers under some of the soot, but that way we know we're solid, so we can line these up in order. Number 1, we can push cylinder 1 down, get her out of our way. And then we'll rotate number 2. Let's see. Now we'll stamp number 2 on this side because it's easier to get to. And then we'll keep moving along. All right, yeah. Don't forget your thrust bearings. All right. Bearings look excellent through and through for 200,000+ miles. So here is the rest of our, let's grab a front head. Rest of our main bearings. Pop these out. Okay. I'll stack these up, make sure, I don't think any of them are different, but just in case, we'll keep them in order. Put them in front of the main caps there. Same thing with our rod bearings. Go ahead and yank all these out. Yeah, rod bearings look really good. That's going to go here. That's going to go here. Push. Push. Some of these are, the oil creates kind of like a suction cup. So they're kind of a bear to get out sometimes. So if you twist them, they'll come out. Just like that. Keep these in order. Not that I need them in order, but because we ain't putting them back in. All right. Now we're going to grab a clean rag, some brake parts cleaner. I'm just going to wipe everything down. Get it nice and wet. And I'll wipe all our surfaces down in here. This is a brand new rag, straight out of the box. So, sure we don't get any contamination on anything. Make sure you clean your surface for your thrust bearing as well, down in here. Again, this is not a full rebuild. We're not popping the pistons out. Cylinder walls are freaking excellent. Pistons move freely. This thing had good compression, so I'm not concerned about that. We just want to kind of freshen up the lower end, get it ready for boost in the future. That way we don't have to tear it back apart ever. And let's get the rods cleaned out now. Get all this old residue out. You know, it's funny how similar these are to an LS engine. You know, I've been inside of many LS engines and they look almost identical. Sometimes, even though it's a push rod engine, I feel like Chevy kind of copied this with the 6-bolt mains, or maybe they bought some of the plans from them and modified it to be a push rod engine, but it's very, very similar. This section here almost looks identical. Okay. All right. Okay, all that is wiped out nice. What we're going to do now is we're going to go grab our polish, and I'll show you guys how to just quickly buff up, polish the crank. Okay, years back on YouTube I actually learned this, and I've done it on a couple motors since then. I had to reorder a tube, but this is from Europe. It's Auto Sol metal polish. I bought it on Amazon, but ended up getting shipped from Europe, so it took a little while to get here. But this is the right, I guess, just enough rubbing compound to polish the crank without doing any kind of deep grooves or anything like that. The biggest thing you want to do is you want to use a new microfiber cloth that's not been used ever before. So get yourself a microfiber cloth, and then what we're going to do, super simple, is you're going to put some of this polish on the crank, and we're going to take the microfiber. You're going to use the microfiber. What I like to do is cut it into strips. I think I got a razor in here somewhere. Yeah. Need a razor. Move some of this stuff around real quick. And you're just going to cut the microfiber into about a strip about the same width as the crank. And then what you want to do also on that microfiber, once you cut it, you're going to cut off the cut it right out of the middle of the rag. Get this to cut a little easier. There we go. Okay. Sorry guys. All right, then you're gonna cut off the threaded part at the ends because you don't want that extra thickness. You want this thing to stay even across the board. There we go. Cut that off. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's kind of messy, but just get rid of that rope end, the stitching at the end. Here we go. So just a piece of cloth. You're going to cut off that rope end. I'm just going to wrap it around. I'm just going to rub the compound in with the microfiber. I'll probably put too much on this first one, but I'll give you the idea. I'm trying not to make this video forever long, so this is just, like I said, just the right amount of not necessarily grit, but just, I guess it would be grit. And I'll show you guys. And take a piece of the clean rag, wipe it off. Make sure we get this wax out of the holes here. There we go. Okay. And look how shiny and smooth that surface is. So we're going to do that to the whole crank before we throw it back in, and we'll move on. So again, this is just a at-home micro polish. It's, you know, you could take it to a machine shop, have it polished. But this crank is forged. So that is how she turns out. I mean, you can tell, I'll try to put some before and after pictures. I mean, you can already see it's like glass smooth on everything. So good little micro polish. And then I went ahead and polished the surfaces a little bit where the seal actually rides. Make sure there's no little lip or groove from the rear main or the front crank seal. All right. So we're using Red Line assembly lube to reassemble this thing. We're gonna end up reusing our thrust bearings because, or technically they're thrust washers, they're not really bearings, but they're plenty good. So what we're gonna end up doing is getting these out. We're gonna go ahead and sort out these main. These do not have a keyway. So these are, if you look here, this is what they mean by standard X. X is that 0.001 extra clearance. Not sure if the video got this or not, so let's start again. All right, so we got the thrust washers in there. We just put a really thin layer of engine lubricant on there to help hold them to the side of the block so they don't fall out when you're stabbing the crank. These are the King race bearings with the slightly oversized. When you get 2 new packets, they'll have numbers inside here. Just keep the number 1 with the number 1 of the second packet, that kind of thing. We're gonna go ahead and put the lower level in, and then we'll stab the crank. So normally I'd be plastic gauging this if I was building this for someone, being that it's my own motor, and looking at the crank, looking at all the bearings, this is all standard size. I'm just gonna go for it. Like I said, normally I take the whole steps of just plastic gauging each and every one just to make sure, but I trust King bearings, and like I said, just looking at this thing with how good the crank is, how great the original rod bearings and main bearings were, we're just going to go with these standard slightly oversized bearings, get it all together, and then rotate it and see how it feels. And like I said, when we get it in the car, I mean, we still got a long ways to go before the project's done. So, you know, hopefully we'll fire it up, check oil pressure, all that. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and insert our APR studs. We'll get those all lined up, and then we'll start to get those torqued down, and then we'll get the rod bolts in, and the rod caps. We've got a couple rods already touching the crank. Another thing you saw me do, I know it was on time lapse, so probably hard to see, but I needed a second set of hands, so I just hooked a bungee cord on the bottom of the rods that would be touching to keep them out of the way. I tried to stab it in there prior, but they wanted to sit underneath the crank, so that allowed me to get number 7 and number 2 onto the crank and set the crank down in the cradle. And then I took a flat blade screwdriver and I just made sure that the surface of the block here and the bearing were the same. A couple of them from settling in the crank, a couple of them were sticking up a little high, so I just put you gotta be real careful, don't touch the crank with it, but you just kind of go like this and just rotate those bearings ever so slightly to make sure they're truly flush on each side. Everything looks good now. So we're gonna go ahead and get these ARP bolt or APR bolts in. All right, so with the ARP, making sure this battery's still on. Okay. With the ARP main studs, you're going to have long ones and short ones. Your long ones are going to go in the inner, and then where the short ones are actually machined to stop right here. So the long ones will be the inners, the shorter ones will be the outside. Once they're in, they'll sit the same height like that. So we're going to go ahead and throw some grease Now, ARP doesn't require grease to go on both sides. It says you can, but normally it just goes on the what's the word I'm looking for? Normally the grease just goes on the nut side and washer side when you're torquing these down, but I'm going to add just a little bit. It says you can add grease to the threads as long as it doesn't go into a water jacket. So I'm going to add some grease to the block side as well. Again, if these were going into some kind of water jacket, you would need the specialized sealer for that. This kit is from, I got it from Superstore or something like that, but it is XAT Racing. For some reason, XAT Racing's website was not working when I was trying to order. Like the PayPal part of it was not working, and then it kept throwing me off. So I ended up ordering it through like the Superstore or whatever, which is XAT anyway. So at least when I got billed, it was billed out that way. So that website seemed to work. So, all right. Now we got our longs and our shorts. So we'll get the long ones started first. Again, long ones go on the inside. Now this motor is obviously already studded from the factory. One of the reasons why it's so strong, but the studs, if you remember, you can see here, these studs are a lot thinner. So, factory stud, the new ARP stud. The only reason I'm putting these in now is so that way when I stab the new bearings, they line right up. And they're not cockeyed or off because they fit really tight on the block side of things. So, okay, now the shorties go in right next to them. Okay, so for our instructions here, they don't give you a torque spec on any of these bolts here. I always just run them in about, whenever I do ARP bolts, I usually run them in to about 8 foot-pounds. It's really, really light, just to make sure they're seated, you know, and they're not sticking up. Some of these do look like they're slightly taller than the other. I guess they all do. These ones are just ever so slightly taller than the shorter ones, but it's not a big deal there. So our torque spec is going to be 20, 40, 60. So working from the middle outwards in a, you know, so it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Sorry. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So it's going to be all that. And then the side ones go in last. On the side, I don't know if my master gasket kit came with them. These are what they call sealing washers on here. And it says to use new Toyota sealing washers for these side ones. I did get the kit came with ARP bolts, but I got to use factory Toyota washers for the side ones. So I got to make sure I have those. But let's go ahead and get our mains swapped out. All right, so one thing I do is I just put the ARP grease in my hands, and I get the washers because they want you to put the grease on any mating surface. So I put the washers in my hands and roll them around so it gets grease on both sides. And then I put it on the flat table, put a pile, and then I just kind of skim the top of the bolts past it so that way the bottom side of the bolts have it. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and run these in. I'm not gonna tighten them. This gun has a speed control on the trigger, so we're just gonna run them down till they touch. Okay, those are all ran in, so now we're gonna torque them. 20, 40, 60 is the torque spec. So let's get my old reliable torque wrench here. Okay. 15 and 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 40, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 60. If I pass, so we pass twice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. All right, so now we're moving on to the rods. We're gonna go ahead and get this one that, since it's already up in the up position, we'll get this one going. It's gonna be cylinders 5 and 6. Okay, there we go. There's number 6. Make sure the bearings, okay, bearings are set. All right. It's gonna be number 5 and 6, so what we wanna do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Grab our number 5. All right. Clean out the bearing. Number 5, number 5. Then we want number 5 in here. Right here, boom. Okay. Oh, gotta open up our lube. Got an annoying fly flying around in here. All right, let's see here. Okay, lube this bad boy up. I did throw the flywheel back on loosely with 2 bolts, so that way it'd make rotating everything easier. Some leverage. So fun fact about these, they use, as I was mentioning earlier, they're very similar to LS engines. Well, they use the exact same part number rod bolt from ARP as an LS1 engine does, so I find that interesting. Get all my rod bolts out of here real quick. Okay, put a little bit on the threads, a little bit on the head of the bolt, one up here, Okay. A little bit on the threads, and a little bit on the head of the bolt. Okay, 2. And I think I'm going to need to go get a socket for these as well, because I only brought in a 12, 13, and 14 12 point. I'll have to run out to the truck. I'm just going to loosely place these in, just hold everything in place. Okay, there's one. Now we need to do number 6. It should be number 6, correct. Bearing's already out. Okay, let me put you guys on pause real quick and run out and get the socket I need, and then I'm also going to need to get the torque spec, because these don't have the torque spec on them since these are for an LS, and I'll look that up real quick. So everything I can find online says for the ARP bolts, once lubricated, 53 to 55. We're going to split the difference and go 54 for that, the rod, ARP rod bolt. So 53 to 55. So let's go. There's 45, 51, 2, 3. And we're going to split the difference. We'll go 54. I'm just going to make minor adjustments to each side. Make sure the gaps close up nicely. Okay. Now we can okay. $55 or 54. 54. Double check, okay. First set of rod bolts. Hopefully you guys can see that. Hopefully, yeah, okay. The camera got it kicked over a bit. All right. Number 5 and 6 are done. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and rotate this, making sure we don't hit anything. Get our next set up, which looks like is gonna be number 1 and 2. This thing is rolling over very nicely. So we're gonna go ahead and throw all these in. Then we'll come back to you guys and show you how it feels, how it looks. Well guys, short of putting in the side bolts, I gotta verify I have the proper Toyota sealer washers. We got all the ARP studs and bolts in on the rods and mains. We got all new King racing bearings. Let's see how this thing turns. Beautiful. You can actually hear the compression just by hand. Oh, this thing This thing rolls beautifully. Now I have this is loose, so a little slop in that, but this feels good and solid. Beautiful. We're gonna call it a video there, you guys. We got a lot of silicone to clean up before we put any of these pan gaskets back on. We obviously waiting for the new oil pump, so we want to verify that's all going to fit. Everything, all the research I've done says it'll fit with a little bit of modifications to the pan for clearance for that oil pressure relief valve bolt. So on that secondary pan there. So for now, this is JP Street and Performance, where dream cars are built, not bought. From the first cut to the final pass, I'll catch you guys on the next episode.